This is the Big Stories Podcast, where we tell the amazing and inspiring stories from across the Big 12 Conference.
Welcome to the Big Stories Podcast. I'm your host, Cleon Wall. The most wonderful time of the year is upon us, and we are not talking about Christmas. We are talking about NCAA basketball tournament time. But a couple of schools in the Big 12, they will be looking for new basketball coaches instead of dancing in March. That's coming up a bit later in the podcast, but first, it's time for this week's storylines.
The Big Stories' 5 biggest storylines. Number 5.
How about those Arizona Wildcats? They were the best team in the conference during the season, and they end up the best team in the Big 12 tournament. It didn't come easy. They needed a game-winning shot to beat Iowa State in the semifinals and then held off Houston twice to claim the crown. Give credit to Houston and Iowa State, who both played the Wildcats tough and are 2 seeds in the NCAA tournament. The Big 12 may not have as many seeds in the tournament as the SEC or Big 10, but they have 3 teams that I think are legitimate threats to make the Final Four. By the way, that would be pretty remarkable. Now back to Arizona and their backcourt. Braden Burries and Jaden Bradley are going to be a handful in the tourney. The duo can both play point guard and also play off the ball. I think that's what makes them so dangerous. Other than a stinker of a scoring game against Iowa State, the freshman Burries scored over 21 points in 3 of his last 4 games. Bradley hit the game winner against Iowa State, and we'll have more on him in a second. And then you have Anthony Del Orso, who can come off the bench and light it up from outside at pretty much any time. More than anything, this team doesn't seem to have an ego. I think that's why they are one of the favored teams in the Big Dance. I can't wait to see this tournament, how the Big 12 does in it.
Number 4.
Okay, back to Jaden Bradley, and I'm here to apologize to him. Jaden, I'm so sorry. I questioned why you were named the Big 12 Player of the Year, and that was my mistake. The game-winning shot you hit against Iowa State shut me up. You didn't go to anyone else when the game was on the line. ISU freshman Cleon Wall played terrific defense on you, even after you kind of, shoved him a little bit, but that's a small quibble. You took a difficult shot and made it. You, sir, proved why you are the conference's most outstanding player, and I'm just a podcaster in Provo, Utah.
Number 3.
The Big 12's LED court at the conference tournament was cool to look at, but that was really about it. It wasn't the same as Wood. Players were slipping and falling, and Texas Tech's Christian Anderson injured his groin when he slipped. You could say the biggest misstep was even giving the court a go without a thorough test. I mean, they probably should have, gotten some retired basketball players to give it a try before making an announcement and putting the court there in Kansas City. But I at least give the Big 12 credit for being innovative and giving it a try. I actually think the biggest misstep was hearing about the same problems that we heard during the men's tournament, during the women's tournament, and they didn't do anything about it. It doesn't look good when you make the change for men, but really didn't seem to listen to the women.
Number 2.
Here are some potential Big 12 storylines I like going into the NCAA tournament. If BYU wins their game against Texas or NC State, they could play old WCC basketball foe Gonzaga in the round of 32. The Zags beat BYU plenty of times, but some of their losses, and they were considered upset losses, came to the Cougars. And the game would be in Portland, which should give Gonzaga the advantage since they're just across the border in Washington State. But I expect a few Cougar fans to be at the game in Portland. By the way, if BYU really goes on a tear, they could meet Arizona in the Elite 8. The Wildcats would be favored, but I think the Cougars could give them a good game. I still would favor the Wildcats in that game. Arizona could have their handful with either Villanova or Utah State in round 2. The Aggies are ticked off that they didn't get a higher seed. It could provide for some nice fire in the second round. I still think Arizona, late in the game, would probably finish off the Aggies. How far can Kansas go? Can they put that loss to Houston, behind them? That big loss to Houston behind them, that game that was in the Big 12 tournament, and possibly advance in the Big Dance. They should beat Cal Baptist. I have no doubts about that. They'll beat Cal Baptist, but I wonder if they can beat St. John's in the second round. Houston could face Texas A&M in the second round, which would be a fun matchup since the two teams and their two campuses are not that far from each other. But I would rather see them take on St. Mary's. Why? The Gales are a team that prides itself on tough defense and getting off good shots. I love high-flying basketball. I love games in the 80s, 90s, and then if you're in the NBA, I like them in the hundreds or 120s. But if those two teams face off against each other, it could be the first 1-50 to win. Now that I said it, the Cougs will probably light them up. I love that TCU is in the big dance. I think that they could beat Ohio State. Then they would face Duke. I wouldn't put it past Jamie Dixon to ugly that game up and make it close. Duke still probably wins it. I really hope Texas Tech's Christian Anderson is healthy enough to face off potentially against Alabama in the second round. He's an exciting player, and I want him to get as much run as possible at the biggest stage. UCF gets UCLA in round one. The Golden Knights have proven they can upset some big-time teams in the Big 12, so don't be surprised if they can at least win one game in the NCAA Tournament. I was looking at Iowa State's potential path to the Final Four, and I honed in on a potential Tennessee or Virginia matchup in the Sweet 16. But I should probably not overlook a probable matchup against Kentucky in the second round. I think they would have the firepower and defense to move on to the Final Four and to beat Kentucky and potentially Tennessee or Virginia. By the way, I'm just looking forward to a great first weekend of action for the Big 12 teams and beyond.
Number 1.
Kansas State doesn't wait long to hire its new head coach. Casey Alexander comes to the Little Apple from Belmont. The Bruins were 26-6 this year, but that sixth loss was to Drake in the Missouri Valley Tournament, 100-79. That doesn't look good, but it did make Alexander available sooner to hire him. Alexander has won at all of his stops and has 303 victories in 15 years. Now he gets the chance to do it on a bigger level. For its part, Kansas State, with an experienced coach, Jerome Tang's college experience before coming to K-State was as an assistant at Baylor, so I'm not really surprised that they went with someone who had head coaching experience. Alexander said he wanted to coach the Wildcats and be in the Big 12, which he acknowledges is not an easy conference to coach in. Alexander also said he understands the college basketball world we are in, and that guys will transfer in and out of programs, but he wants to try to build this team through development. It will be fascinating how he will do in Season 1 and how many of his current players will stick around Manhattan. I also expect some of his Belmont players to follow him west to Kansas. Kansas State has their new head coach in Casey Alexander, but two other Big 12 teams will be searching for their new head coaches in the near future. Cincinnati relieved Wes Miller of his duties, while ASU parted ways with Bobby Hurley. Not long after the Bearcats and Sun Devils were eliminated from the Big 12 tournament, and before any official announcements were made on either coach, I sat down with a couple of esteemed colleagues to talk about where each team was going now that their season was done. We will start with Michelle Gardner, the Sun Devils beat writer for the Arizona Republic. ASU was playing so well near the end of the season, and then they got beat by Iowa State in the conference tournament by 49 points. I asked her how the locker room reacted after the loss. Again, our conversation happened before Coach Hurley left ASU.
It was pretty down. I was really glad that they beat Baylor and they played a very good game against Baylor for 35 or so minutes, just because that gave them a little bit of a boost. And now it also means that they're going to finish with a winning record, so that's kind of nice. We knew from the start this was going to be a tough game, just because they played Iowa State on Saturday. Iowa State plays great defense, and they turn the ball over 23 times. And now you're asking a team to play that same team basically on 24 hours notice. So it's not like you can go in the gym and spend a couple days working. They didn't have that luxury. And I mean, it was just from the start. I mean, they had 6 turnovers, I think, in the first 3 minutes. It was literally from the opening tip-off. So it is disappointing that they weren't a little bit more competitive in this game. It was a pretty down locker room, and it's a very tight team. So, and I think the kids know that it's probably Bobby's last game too, and they really like him. And there's only 3 players that have used up their eligibility, so it's a locker room full of guys that could come back. So I think that the loss was one thing, but knowing maybe it's Bobby's last game too, that kind of added another layer to that.
Yeah, lots of media reports out there that Coach Hurley is not going to be back for next season. What is his departure going to mean for this program after he coached there for over a decade?
Well, when the reports came out a couple days ago, I got on the phone with ASU sources, and they said that that's a little bit premature. And I get it. And I think for those reports to come out, that was doing a disservice to the players and the coach to let this thing play out, I think. Because when I talked to ASU sources, they said, no, that's premature. I think we all kind of knew this was coming, but at that moment, that decision was not finalized. But I think we kind of all knew it was coming. Now, the problem here is that right now, ASU is not a great job. So when you look at the ASU fan base, it's really strange because half people are on one side and half are on the other, and there's really kind of no in between. There is a portion of the fan base that gets that Bobby Hurley doesn't have the resources and has never had the resources he needs to compete in this big boy conference, okay? It's resources, it's the quality of your facility, everything is rolled into kind of that this is not a good job. Then there's another portion of the fan base that wants him gone because what has he done? And the dynamic of, I think his demeanor, we all know he's a fiery guy. That's the way he was as a player. So I think that his fiery demeanor turns part of the fan base off. Now, if you're Dan Hurley, you can get away with it because you're winning national titles. If you're Bobby Hurley and you're going 500, you can't get away with it. So I don't think there's any ASU fans that are on the fence. The fans are either he should stay, he's never had a chance, or he should go. So again, I think resources is part of the problem. The facility is another problem. It's probably one of the worst facilities in a power conference program. There are renovations in the works that are going to start this year. They're basically going to gut the interior of the arena starting the day after graduation, so that's in the works. But right now, it's not a great job. So who do you think you can get?
With all of this hanging in the air, and I know this is coming, we're talking to you not long after ASU lost to Iowa State today. What are the next steps for this team, this program, so that they can at least be in the top half or maybe top third of the Big 12?
Well, I think any coach candidate that comes in, I think the first question he's going to ask is, what are you giving me? Like, what do I have to go compete with? I think that's any coach wants to know that. There are some things about the job that make it a desirable job. I mean, Tempe and Phoenix, it's a great area to live. The weather's great. The school's great. I think that they've got the right administration in place. I think that Graham Rossini's done a great job as the athletic director. And when he came in a year and a half ago, I think people kind of didn't know what to expect. But we've seen what's happened with the football program. We've seen the improvement in the women's program. I think people forget the women's program was 10 and 20 something last year, and they're 24 wins this year and probably in the NCAA tournament, depending who you ask. So I think people have seen what can be done here if the resources can go to, getting better players. I mean, when you look at the ASU roster, I was talking to a beat writer that covers Arizona. Every single player on the University of Arizona roster is probably making more than the best paid guy on the ASU team. It's not even close. So, they've got to put the resources in to be competitive. And I don't know if this job right now is going to attract a high-end power conference coach. I think if you're looking at candidates, you're looking at either assistant coaches that are in power conference programs that maybe want a head coaching position, or you're looking coaches at mid-major schools for whom ASU would be a step up. That's my take on where we're at right now.
Oh, yeah, and it makes sense. It makes sense. Senior guard Maurice Odom played his last collegiate game this week, or at least we assume it's going to be his last collegiate game. He's been a bright spot on the team all season. What is this team going to miss without Mo being on the floor for the Sun Devils next season?
Well, I mean, he's just a great guy. Like, I think that one thing, the team had some talent last year, but the one thing that they were missing, and, you know, this is what happens when you get a bunch of ragtag cast-offs from other programs. They had five-star prospects last year. But when you got a lot of egos, stuff happens, okay? So the team that Bobby recruited, and let's throw another thing out there, when you don't renew the man's contract and he comes into the season as a lame duck coach, makes it pretty hard to go out and recruit. So I think he did a pretty good job salvaging a roster that won 17 games, which is 4 more than they won last year, despite everything. So he put together a roster of, and then the other thing is he's got a lot of international players. He never really leaned into the international market, and a lot of those international players didn't get to campus until September. But Mo Odom was a stabilizing factor, and I think where they really needed him is from a leadership standpoint, because last year they didn't really have a guy that the other players listened to. And sometimes you need a voice in the locker room that's not the coach's. And I've seen Mo go to players and talk to them, and he can give them tough love, give them criticism to stir them in the right direction. And to these players' credit, they've all taken that. When he's jumped on them, they've taken it that, hey, he cares about us and it's coming from a place of love and he wants us to get better. So they didn't have that last year. If Mo Odom was on last year's team and tried to talk to some of these guys or give them advice, none of them would have listened. So I think that's where he was just a stabilizing force. I saw one game where Masamba Diop kind of got a little heated and was a little frustrated, and Mo stepped in front of him and kind of backed him away from the referee and kind of, took him aside, So I think that the leadership that Mo provided was invaluable. And hopefully, the thing is, a lot of these players are coming back, so, hopefully they've learned a lot over the season. But yes, Mo Odom, and even Pig Johnson, I mean, his nickname should be Pig. I mean, that's very appropriate for the kind of game he plays. And again, Pig is a cast-off from an NAIA school. So this was a bunch of guys that were cast-offs from other programs that played with a chip on their shoulder, that wanted to prove themselves.
Now let's talk about the Cincinnati Bearcats, who lost in heartbreaking fashion to UCF in the conference tourney. I asked Nick Niehouse of the Chatterbox Bearcats podcast where this team ended up in terms of what he expected in the preseason. And again, this all happened before we found out that Wes Miller was fired.
Oh my goodness. Well, we always get duped every single offseason when it comes to Wes Miller. I'm not going to lie. Like, he is the eternal offseason champion. Seriously. And I'm it's funny to hear, but it's true because you hear it every single time in the portal where it's like, hey man, we got all of these studs in the portal, like Mustafa Cham, our center, who we apparently, paid $2 million plus for, and we took UCF's assistant coach just to get him. I mean, that was a top 3 center we got in the portal. We get Baba Miller, who's supposedly really good. Sean Abayev is a McDonald's All-American. The expectations couldn't have been more through the roof for this team, considering how bad it was the first 4 years of his tenure. And obviously we're not going to make the tournament. So it's nothing but another disappointing year under Wes Miller, truthfully.
Well, the Bearcats, in that game against UCF, the Bearcats had an 8-point lead with over 2 minutes left to go in regulation. What happened at the end of regulation that they could not hold on to that lead?
Well, I said it on my show the night before on Chatterbox Bearcats, which is, the show that I do. So Wes has only had 2 starting guards in the Big 12. We've been in the Big 12 for 3 years now. It's been Jizzle James and Day Thomas. And I said that, I'm like, man, he might go down with the ship with just 2 guys at the guard position. And I probably foreshadowed it a little too much because down the stretch of the Central Florida game, man, those 2 turned the ball over, I think 4 or 5 times. Day Thomas had a wide open 3 to win the game at the end of the regulation. Jizzle James had a 10-second backcourt violation. And our best player, Bobby Miller, did not have a great game in general. So I think he went down with the guards.
Speaking of Day Thomas, he did score all 7 points for the Bearcats in overtime. He and Bobby Miller were honored on senior night not that long ago. What has the leadership of these two players meant to this team, even though there have been struggles this year too?
Well, Day, people say it all the time, is a true Bearcat. Like, we like to hang our hat on toughness, resilience. And there's this picture of Day that encapsulates it all, where I think he got hit in the face and he's bleeding like down his mouth. He's got bloody teeth and he's smiling, like clapping his hands, smacking the floor, playing defense. Like, that guy's a really true Bearcat, and he's somebody that stuck around all 3 years. I mean, he went to JUCO, so he could only get 3 years in Division I basketball, and he stuck around. You don't see that very often in today's day and age. Bobby Miller, I don't know how much vocal leadership he had, but obviously he was our best player this year. So, I mean, he led by that example.
Cincinnati had been on a tear coming into the conference tournament. If you take out the loss to TCU in the last game of the regular season, but they'd kind of been on a tear. Then they lose to TCU. Then they kind of have to hold off Utah and beat Utah. And Utah's not really a good team at all. And then you lose to UCF in overtime, which is a gut punch all in and of itself. What happened between that team that looked like they were on a tear and that team that eventually lost to TCU in overtime, or not TCU, that lost to UCF in overtime in the Big 12 Conference Tournament?
Yeah, it's funny because when you play TCU, before the tip, we were very excited. We thought, hey, we're a tournament team. We've won 6 of our last 7. We're really rolling. But then TCU out-toughed us. And they just played really hard-nosed defense. And outside of BYU and Kansas, you look at that stretch, and it wasn't really all that impressive, to be completely honest. Kansas on the road was one of the more unexpected wins in my entire life for the Bearcats, truthfully. I mean, that was so unexpected. And then you beat Oklahoma State without their best player. He went down. BYU obviously is missing Richie Saunders, and they were kind of reeling at that point in time. Maybe they've picked it up since, but in that point in time, like, I just think we got a little schedule lucky, to be completely honest. I don't want to discredit everything Wes Miller did, but you play TCU, that was the best defense we played in a while, and you don't look any good, right? So I don't know. I hate to not give credit where it's due because that was a good stretch, but I think we're getting a little bit of hype, media-wise.
Speaking of Wes Miller, I know we're recording this right after Cincinnati's loss to UCF. What does his future look like now? Because, again, you've talked about how you get duped into feeling like this team is going to be better than it is, and they show a little bit of promise. They also disappoint it sometimes this season. What does his future look like now?
Yeah, if this is getting released later, like in a week or so, I'm hoping that we already have a new head coach, to be completely honest. I mean, I think his time is up. I think this was the UCF game, which I'm just coming off of. I'm glad you said that, is a perfect encapsulation of what we have seen in Cincinnati in 5 years. Like, just a choke down the stretch. Wes was already on the outs when it came to the fan base. People boo him every single time he's at the arena. They stopped announcing his name in the starting lineups. So you have this happen where you're still on the outside of the bubble looking in, and you have a chance to beat a rival, really. UCF is a rival, especially, with football and everything, but basketball too. You don't want to lose to them. And then you have a chance to play Arizona. If you win that game, you're in the tournament, and you just choke against UCF, don't even get to play Arizona. I think he's gone. I truly do. I don't think he's a bad coach per se.
Right.
I just think he's a replaceable coach.
What does this team look like this next season? Are we talking massive overhaul for the Bearcats?
Yeah, I don't know. So it's funny because we've been talking about that for a while. There's a freshman on our team who's from Cincinnati who people would like to stay. He's shown promise. His name is Tyler McKinley. And then there's another freshman, Keyshawn Tillery, who's gotten a ton of minutes down the stretch of Big 12 play, who people, again, would like to stay. But all these contracts that are written into these NIL deals now, I'm sure they all have outs where if the coach is fired or leaves, you can get out. So it's just hard to say. I mean, in today's day and age, you feel like you're starting over brand new every single year, regardless if the coach leaves or not.
A big thanks to Michelle Gardner and Nick Niehouse for joining the podcast. Coming up on Thursday's episode, we talk with Roman Roselle, a former walk-on wrestler at ASU. Roman was an inspiration in 2019 after leaving the military and becoming the oldest walk-on wrestler in NCAA history. Then his life fell apart. Find out how he rebounded and what he's doing to help others to do the same. I'm your host, Cleon Wall. This episode was produced by Garrett Glauser. Big Stories is a production of BYU Radio.